There are two key sets of hours rules that apply to drivers of large goods vehicles: the EU Driver's Hours Rules and the Road Transport Working Time Regulations. You must follow both sets of rules, so in this DVD, we'll cover all the rules as we go along.
It's really important for drivers to comply with driver's hours rules, mainly for road safety reasons. The rules are there to protect not only drivers but the rest of the public from tiredness. There's a number of penalties that can be imposed on drivers if they fail to comply with the rules, ranging from fairly small fines to losing your vocational driving licence. In really serious cases, drivers have gone to prison.
Well, action will be proportionate, but it can range from a warning to suspension of a vocational licence to revocation and disqualification. In extreme cases, I've told drivers that they'll be disqualified for very long periods of time, a matter of years, and they should leave the industry.
A tachograph is used to record your daily working period, using symbols to show what you're doing. A steering wheel shows driving time, and crossed hammers is used when you carry out any other work. The bed symbol records periods of both rest and break. A box with a diagonal line shows periods of availability, when you're available for work but not actually working. We'll use these symbols to help explain the rules in the rest of this DVD. The rules can be split into 5 main areas. The law tells you when you must take a break within your shift. It limits the amount of driving you can do, and in some cases, working at night is restricted. You must take minimum rest periods, and there are rules on the amount of work you can do in each week. So let's start with the rules on breaks. A break is a period during your shift used exclusively for recuperation, where you must not work or drive. You can take a break as a passenger in a moving vehicle as long as you're not doing any work. There are 2 types of breaks: breaks triggered by the amount of driving you've done and those triggered by the amount of work. First, let's look at rules on breaks from driving. After no more than 4.5 hours of driving, you must take a break of at least 45 minutes. The 4.5 hours could be in one block or separated by periods of work or availability. But once you reach a total of 4.5 hours of driving, you must stop. You cannot carry out any work or show a period of availability after this point. Only a break or rest will do. Once you've taken 45 minutes of break, the driving calculation starts afresh, even if you take your break early. For example, if you drove for 3 hours, followed by a 45-minute break, you would then be free to drive for another 4.5 hours before the next break from driving is needed. The 45-minute break can also be split into 2 parts, provided these are taken over the driving period. The first break must be at least 15 minutes long, the second at least 30 minutes. Along with breaks from driving, breaks from work must be taken on both driving and non-driving working days. Work includes driving and other work. You must not work for more than 6 hours without a break. Each break from work has to be at least 15 minutes long and must interrupt working time. In other words, you cannot take a break from work at the very start or end of your shift. The total amount of break you must take depends on the total amount of work you will do in a shift. If you will not work for more than 6 hours in your working day, there's no need for a break from work. But remember, breaks from driving could still be needed. If your shift contains more than 6 but no more than 9 hours, then you must have breaks totaling 30 minutes. If you'll work for more than 9 hours, you have to take at least 45 minutes in total. Let's look at an example on a non-driving day. This shift is made up of 12 hours of work, so at least 45 minutes of break must be taken. One way to meet the rules is to take the 45-minute break in one go in the middle of the shift. But the breaks can also be split into periods of at least 15 minutes and distributed throughout the shift. Here, all the rules are being met. No more than 6 hours has been worked without a break. Each break is at least 15 minutes long, and a total of 45 minutes break has been taken. This example helps explain how the rules work, but you should always try to spread your breaks throughout your shift to maximize your safety. Break periods can double up to count as both a break from driving and a break from work, provided both sets of rules are satisfied. To sum up, you must take a break after 4.5 hours of driving or 6 hours of work, whichever happens soonest. Let's now look at driving rules. The amount of driving you do is limited in a shift, a week, as well as a fortnight. In each shift, you're normally limited to a maximum of 9 hours of driving in total. You can extend your driving over 9 hours up to a maximum of 10 hours, but you can only do this twice in a week. A week is a fixed period that starts at 00 hours on Monday and finishes at midnight on the following Sunday. So, for example, if you drove for 9.5 hours on Monday and 9.5 hours on Wednesday, you're then limited to 9 hours on every other day in the week, as you've used up your 2 allowances. In each week, you're limited to a maximum of 56 hours. In a 6-day working week, this gives you up to 10 hours driving on 2 days and a maximum of 9 hours on 4. You must not drive for more than 90 hours in any 2 consecutive weeks. So, if you drove for a total of 56 hours in week 1, you would be limited to a maximum of 34 hours in the following week, but could drive up to 56 hours again in week 3. If you actually drove for 40 hours in week 3, you could then drive up to 50 hours in week 4. Let's recap the driving limits. In a shift, you can drive for up to 9 hours. This can be extended to 10 hours twice a week. You must not drive for more than 56 hours in a week, or for more than 90 hours in any 2 consecutive weeks. Now, let's look at night work. If you carry out any work between midnight and 4 a.m., you may be limited to 10 hours of total working time in a 24-hour period. However, the rules allow this limit to be varied by an agreement between the workforce and the employer. So, if you do work during nighttime, ask your manager what limits apply. Now we shall move on to rest requirements. The law requires you to take minimum periods of rest in a day, a week, and a fortnight. Rest is an uninterrupted period where you're able to freely dispose of your time. Within 24 hours of the start of your shift, you must complete a daily rest period. The rest must normally be at least 11 hours long. So when you take a regular daily rest of 11 hours, the maximum shift time from clocking on to clocking off is 13 hours. 11 taken from 24 is 13. Any shift longer than 13 hours means daily rest has been reduced. You can reduce daily rest to a minimum of 9 hours up to 3 times between weekly rests. When you take a reduced daily rest, the maximum shift is 15 hours long. 9 from 24 is 15. You can split a daily rest into 2 periods. The first period must be at least 3 hours long, the second at least 9 hours long, a rest of 12 hours in total, which again must be completed within 24 hours of starting your shift. If a vehicle has more than one driver for all driving periods, there are special rules on daily rest. In these circumstances, at least 9 hours daily rest must be taken within 30 hours of the start of shift. This gives a maximum shift of 21 hours. You can also have just one driver for the first hour of driving. This allows you to pick another driver up en route. If you're accompanying a vehicle being transported by ferry or train, you can interrupt your daily rest once or twice, for example, to get on and off a ferry. This can be done provided you take a regular 11-hour daily rest, the interruptions total no more than 1 hour, and you have access to a bunk during the rest period. Each week you must take either a regular weekly rest of at least 45 hours long or a reduced weekly rest which is anything less than 45 hours but must be at least 24 hours. Weekly rests must have no more than 6 days between them. So if you started your week on Monday morning at 7 a.m, your next weekly rest must start no later than 7 a.m. on the following Sunday. In any 2 consecutive weeks, you must take at least 2 weekly rests, and one of those rests must be at least 45 hours long. In a typical Monday to Friday or Saturday working pattern, we can see that a regular rest must be taken every other week to comply with this rule. but some working patterns allow 2 consecutive reduced weekly rests. As you can see here, the 2-week period of weeks 2 and 3 contain 3 weekly rests. The weekly rest that starts in one week and finishes in another can be counted in either week, but not in both. So if we count the 45 hours rest as being in week 3, the rules are met. Any reductions, rests below 45 hours, must be compensated by an equal amount of rest being added in one block to another rest of at least 9 hours long by the end of the 3rd following week. Let's recap. You must normally take a daily rest of at least 11 hours, but you can reduce this to a minimum of 9 hours up to 3 times between weekly rests. You must take either a regular or reduced weekly rest every week. In any 2 consecutive weeks, you must have at least 2 weekly rests, one of which must be at least 45 hours long. You can take daily rest or reduced weekly rests in your vehicle only if it's stationary and fitted with suitable sleeping facilities. If you're travelling on a ferry or train to take charge of a vehicle and have access to a bunk, this can also be counted as rest. Finally, we'll look at weekly work limits. In any fixed week, you may not work for more than 60 hours. You're also limited to an average of 48 hours per week. Your average is calculated by your employer over a reference period which can be extended from 17 weeks to up to 26 weeks by agreement. Your employer is responsible for keeping records for this average, but you should ensure that you advise your manager in writing if you carry out other work for any other employer. We've now covered all the rules.